For 1 week, a billionaire delivered food anonymously in a major city. Out of hundreds of deliveries, only one person left a tip. It was a nursing student, and she added a note. "I know it's hard out there." 1 month later, he returned to her door. What happened next would erase a burden shared by 45 million Americans. The billionaire was Marcus Thorne, a reclusive tech founder worth an estimated $4.2 billion. For years, he had been silently observing a world of growing inequality from within his penthouse, increasingly disconnected and profoundly lonely. He wasn't looking for a story. He was testing a simple human theory. In an era of convenience and isolation, does basic kindness still exist? Marcus Thorne's life had become a series of silent, high-floor decisions. But his experiment began with a single, mundane obstacle: mastering the delivery app's interface in a rented studio apartment, his billion-dollar fortune digitally hidden. He used a fake name, Marcus Teller, and a prepaid phone. His profile picture was a generic red delivery bag. The system saw only another new driver, one of over 1 million in the country trying to earn a share of a $20 billion gig economy. His preparation was clinical. He studied forum posts where drivers shared tips on which apartment complexes to avoid, which restaurants were slow, how to maximize tips. The average driver, he learned, earned just under $20,000 a year. They worked an average of 17.4 hours per week for apps that classified them as independent contractors, a status that meant no health insurance, no sick pay, no safety net. He bought the uniform, a red polo, a red cap, and felt the thinness of the polyester, so different from the custom-tailored wool he was accustomed to. He rented a common, slightly dented sedan. The goal was total anonymity. For 1 week, he would live on whatever he earned delivering food plus a $100 seed fund. His theory was simple. If you remove the power, the title, the suit, and become just another face in the crowd, what remains? Would people see him? Across the city, 22-year-old Amara Johnson was fighting a different kind of battle. Her life was a meticulously organized spreadsheet of time and debt. By day, she was a third-year nursing student at City College, her textbooks filled with color-coded notes on pharmacology and human anatomy. By night, she worked 12-hour shifts as a certified nursing assistant at a long-term care facility, changing bedsheets, taking vitals, holding the hands of residents who sometimes forgot their own names. In the slivers of time between, she delivered food. It was the only job flexible enough to fit around her clinical rotations and hospital shifts. The math was relentless. Tuition, fees, and books cost over $28,000 a year. She had already accrued $67,000 in federal student loans. The average nursing graduate carries over $40,000. Her CNA job paid $18 an hour. The delivery work after gas and wear on her 10-year-old Honda netted maybe 10. Every dollar was assigned before it was earned. Rent for her shared apartment, the minimum loan payment, groceries, gas. There was no column for emergencies. Marcus's first delivery was a comedy of errors. The restaurant couldn't find the order. The GPS led him to the back of a locked office building after hours. By the time he found the correct entrance, the fries were cold. The customer, a man in his 30s holding a gaming controller, took the bag without a word and closed the door. No tip. The app showed a stark zero. The payment for that half hour of work, $2.50. He sat in his car for a moment, the reality of the math landing with a quiet thud. At that rate, before expenses, he'd make $20 in an 8-hour shift. The rhythm of the week established itself, a grinding metronome of small frustrations. He got lost in a massive suburban maze looking for a house with invisible numbers. He waited 20 minutes in a fast food drive-thru for a single milkshake. He carried heavy bags of groceries up 5 flights of stairs for a $10 order, his lower back, used to ergonomic office chairs, screaming in protest. And overwhelmingly, people did not tip. The orders would complete and the expected tip field would remain blank, or worse, display a zero. He delivered to multi-million-dollar homes with sculpted gardens where the door was opened by someone who didn't meet his eye, took the food, and shut the door. He delivered to luxury high-rises where he had to leave the order with a concierge in a marble lobby. The silence felt total. He was a ghost, a function, a service avatar. His theory of kindness was crumbling under the weight of pure, transactional indifference. Meanwhile, Amara's week was reaching a crisis point. A clinical instructor had scheduled a mandatory simulation lab on her only day off. She had to miss a CNA shift, losing $144 of vital income. Then her car, the lifeline for her delivery work, began making a worrying grinding noise. A mechanic quoted $400 for a new rotor and brake pads. She stared at the quote on her phone, sitting in her car outside the library. $400 was food for 2 months. It was half a textbook. It simply did not exist. That evening, exhausted after a 7-hour clinical, she forced herself to go online and accept delivery requests. Her mind was a fog of drug calculations and patient care plans. Her eyes burned. She had a 50-page reading on cardiovascular disorders due in the morning, but the grinding noise from her brakes was a louder, more urgent demand. On his fifth night Thursday, Marcus felt a deep, unfamiliar fatigue. It wasn't just physical, though his feet ached and his shoulders were tight. It was the fatigue of erasure. He had spent decades being heard, his opinions shaping products used by millions. Now, for nearly a week, he had not had a single meaningful human interaction. He was invisible. He pulled up to a brightly lit fast food restaurant, his 7th pickup of the night. The order was for Amara Johnson. She was waiting inside, her head bent over a textbook on the small plastic table, highlighting a passage with fierce concentration. She wore light blue scrubs under her winter coat. She didn't look up when he gave the restaurant the order number. She was in her own world of pressure, a world he was only beginning to peripherally understand. He delivered the food to a modest apartment building. A man in sweats took the bag, grunted a thanks, and closed the door. The app updated. No tip. Marcus leaned his head against the steering wheel. The experiment felt pointless, cruel even. He was a tourist in a struggle that was these drivers' permanent reality. His hypothesis was wrong. Basic kindness in this context was a scarce, almost extinct currency. He decided then that Friday would be his last day. He would complete the week, write off the experiment as a failed intellectual exercise, and return to his silent penthouse. The loneliness there suddenly seemed preferable to this active, daily negation. Friday night was cold and rainy. Marcus was numb, going through the motions. His last delivery of the night, his final data point, was to the same apartment building he'd visited earlier in the week. The order was from a cheap diner, a grilled cheese, tomato soup, a side of fries. The total was small. He parked, grabbed the insulated bag, and trudged through the drizzle. He knocked on the door of apartment 3B. The door opened. It was the young woman from the fast food restaurant, Amara. She was still in her light blue scrubs, her curly hair pulled into a high puff. She looked exhausted, but she managed a warm, apologetic smile. "Hey, sorry, coming out of the rain for a sec," she said, stepping back. He stood awkwardly in the small doorway, the hall light glowing behind her. She took the bag, then reached for her wallet on a nearby table. She pulled out $5 in folded bills, a 1 and 4 singles, and handed them to him. "I know it's not much," she said, her voice sincere, "but I know it's hard out there." She held his gaze for a second, and in that moment he wasn't invisible. He was seen. Then she gave a small wave, said, "Get home safe," and closed the door. Marcus stood in the dim hallway, the damp $5 bill in his hand. The note wasn't written on paper, but her words were etched in the air. "I know it's hard out there." Out of hundreds of transactions over a week of erasure, this was the only genuine, unsolicited acknowledgement of shared struggle. The only tip that came with empathy attached. The app finally chimed. A $5 tip on an $11 order. A 45% tip. For him, it was a statistical anomaly. For her, it was a significant percentage of her own meager earnings, given freely. He drove back to the rented studio, but his mind wasn't on the road. It was on that tired smile, those scrubs, the calculated generosity from someone who clearly had nothing to spare. His experiment had an answer, but it raised a more urgent question. Who was she? And what did asterisk hard out there really mean in the specific, grinding details of her life? He had to know. The following Monday, he would not return to his old life. He would use every resource at his disposal to find the person in apartment 3B, and what he discovered would shock him to his core. Marcus Thorne did not return to his penthouse. He went to his private office, a silent room with a view of the city he felt he no longer understood, and he began to search. He had a first name from the app receipt, Amara. He had an address. It was a start. He hired a discreet, ethical private investigator with one strict instruction: compile a factual profile, no intrusion, no contact. He needed to understand the context of that $5 tip. The report landed in his inbox 48 hours later. It was 15 pages of stark, unemotional data that painted a portrait of quiet desperation. Amara Johnson, 22. Mother deceased, father out of state with limited contact. No siblings. Put herself through community college to become a certified nursing assistant while working retail. Currently a third-year nursing student at City College, maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Employed as a CNA at Evergreen Care Center working night shifts. Also a gig delivery driver for multiple platforms. Current address: apartment 3B, a 450-square-foot studio she shared with a roommate also in the nursing program. Rent: $900 a month, split. And came the financials. The numbers were a punch to the gut. Total federal student loan debt: $67,418. Average interest rate: 5.3%. Projected total repayment over 10 years: nearly $90,000. Her current CNA salary: $37,440 a year before taxes. The estimated starting salary for a registered nurse in the city: $75,000. The debt-to-income ratio was crushing. The report detailed her weekly routine, pieced together from public schedules and anonymized app data. Classes from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Wednesday. Clinical rotations at the hospital Thursday and Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. CNA shifts at the care center Saturday and Sunday nights, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Delivery work squeezed into evenings, predominantly on weeknights after class. She was averaging 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night, and that was likely optimistic. The investigator included one additional note, a detail that made Marcus push back from his desk. Amara Johnson had been the subject of a small local news feature 8 months earlier. He pulled it up. The article was about unsung heroes in healthcare. It featured Amara at her CNA job talking about her residents. The quote that leaped out was from a resident's daughter. "My mother has advanced dementia. She doesn't recognize me most days, but she lights up when Amara comes in. She calls her my nurse with the warm hands." Amara sits with her and tells her about nursing school. "I think it's the only thread of the present my mother still holds." The article mentioned her dream of becoming a geriatric nurse practitioner, a specialty facing a critical shortage. It did not mention her debt. Marcus stared at the cityscape. His experiment had been abstract, a test of human nature. Now it was concretely about one human. A young woman working 80-plus-hour weeks across 3 jobs, excelling academically, providing profound compassion in a broken healthcare system, and being financially punished for it. The $5 tip wasn't just kindness. It was solidarity from someone in the trenches, someone who recognized a fellow struggler. She had tipped him 45% of her order's value. Proportionally, for his net worth, that would be like him casually giving away $1.8 billion. The absurdity of the comparison hollowed him out. He couldn't just write a check. Not yet. That felt like another transaction, a rich man assuaging his guilt. He needed to understand more to see the machinery of her struggle up close. He instructed his investigator to dig deeper into one specific area, the nursing program itself. Where did the money go? The investigator came back with a breakdown of City College's nursing program costs. Tuition was one part. Then there were the program fees, a $2,000 clinical placement fee every semester, a $900 simulation lab fee, a $600 testing and licensure prep fee, required software subscriptions, $200 per term, the mandatory uniforms, $150, a stethoscope and blood pressure cuff, another $300, the textbooks for one semester, nearly $1,000. It was death by 1,000 cuts, a bureaucratic sieve draining resources from someone who had none to spare. A new, more troubling question emerged. With this schedule, this pressure, how many students like Amara simply broke? The investigator provided the broader context. Nursing student attrition rates nationally hovered around 20%. The primary reasons were not academic failure, but financial pressure and burnout. The system was designed to filter out those without substantial family support. It was selecting for privilege, not necessarily for compassion or grit. Amara, by all data, was an anomaly beating the odds. But for how long? The grinding noise from her car, the $400 repair bill she couldn't pay, that was how the system won. A single ordinary emergency could snap the thread she was dangling from. Marcus needed to see it for himself, not through data points but through human eyes. He devised a new, arguably more intrusive phase of his investigation. He would become a passive observer. Using his resources, he secured permission to audit a single lecture at City College's School of Nursing, citing vague philanthropic interest in healthcare education. He sat in the back of a large, tiered classroom on a Wednesday morning, surrounded by students in scrubs and hoodies. He scanned the room and found her. Amara was in the third row off to the left. She was writing notes on a tablet, her posture perfect, her focus absolute. The professor discussed congestive heart failure, a cascade of pathophysiology. Amara's hand shot up to ask a question, not for clarification, but to connect the mechanism to a medication side effect she'd seen at her CNA job. The professor nodded, impressed. "Exactly, Ms. Johnson. That's the kind of clinical thinking we need." After the lecture, Marcus lingered. He watched Amara pack her bag with efficient movements. She didn't chat with other students. She checked her phone, her face tightening at the screen. He was too far to see, but he could guess. A shift reminder, a low bank balance alert, a notification from the delivery app. She slung her backpack over one shoulder and walked out with purpose, a soldier moving to the next front. That evening, from his car parked discreetly down the block from her apartment building, he saw her leave. She changed from her student clothes into her delivery uniform, a different company's logo, a blue shirt. She got into her Honda, the one with the grinding brakes, and drove off. He followed at a distance, not to stalk her, but to witness the rhythm of this second shift. He saw her double park outside restaurants, jog in and out with bags. He saw her navigate a massive hospital complex, delivering food to staff at a side entrance. He saw her, at one point, pull over and rest her head on the steering wheel for a full minute, a portrait of exhaustion, before shaking her head and driving on to the next pickup. He was assembling a mosaic of her life, and each piece deepened his unease. This wasn't just a hardworking student. This was a person running a marathon at a sprinter's pace, with a backpack full of bricks. The kindness she'd shown him was a tiny flame she'd managed to keep burning in a relentless wind. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, but also a growing anger, not at individuals, but at the vast, impersonal systems that made this her only path. An education system financed by predatory debt, a healthcare system that relied on the exploited labor of trainees, a gig economy that offered flexibility in exchange for stability. A week after receiving the initial report, Marcus convened a small, trusted team, his financial advisor, his lawyer, and the head of his family's charitable foundation. He presented the facts, anonymized at first. "There is a person," he said, "a young woman training to do essential, difficult work that our society desperately needs. She is brilliant, compassionate, and working herself into the ground. She is buried under student debt that will dictate her life choices for decades. I want to eliminate that debt." The lawyer spoke first. A direct gift of that size would have tax implications for her, potentially significant ones. A gift tax could create a new liability. The financial advisor suggested structuring it as a grant from the foundation, specifically for educational debt relief for students entering high-need healthcare fields. It could be a pilot program. But, Marcus interjected, it needs to help asterisk or asterisk. Now, not in 6 months after we design a program. They debated mechanisms, paying the loan servicer directly, establishing a dedicated trust. The conversation was clinical, procedural. Then Marcus asked a question that stopped the room. What is the ethical way to do this without destroying her sense of autonomy? If a stranger pays off your debt, is it a miracle or an invasion? He was no longer just a billionaire solving a problem. He was a man who had been seen by her as a person, and he wanted to return the favor without reducing her to a charity case. The head of his foundation, a woman named Evelyn, offered a crucial insight. The debt is an impersonal force crushing her. The help must feel personal but not patronizing. It must acknowledge her, not just her balance sheet. They devised a multi-phase plan. Phase 1. Address the immediate destabilizing threats. The car repair. An anonymous grant covering urgent living expenses for 3 months, routed through a community organization so it appeared as a need-based bursary she'd somehow qualified for. Phase 2. The debt elimination itself. This was trickier. They settled on having the foundation purchase her specific loan debt from the federal government's secondary market, a legal but complex transaction, and then forgive it. The notification would come as an official letter from the loan holder, stating her debt had been extinguished due to a philanthropic debt forgiveness program for which she had been automatically selected. It would feel like winning the world's most consequential lottery. Phase 3. Marcus's personal addition. A meeting. Once the dust settled, he would request to meet her, reveal his identity and his role, and offer not just a cleared past but a supported future. Mentorship, connections, a potential place in the foundation's future work. It felt rational, clean, benevolent. Marcus approved the plan. The machinery of wealth whirred into motion. The $400 for the car repair was anonymously paid to the mechanic, who called Amara to tell her there had been a mistake in the diagnosis, and the repair was covered under a warranty. The first living expense grant was processed. The complex wheels to buy and forgive her loan portfolio began to turn. Marcus felt a sense of momentum, of a problem being solved. He decided to conduct one final piece of field research. He wanted to see her at her CNA job, the place where, according to the news article, her compassion truly lived. Using his connections in healthcare administration, he arranged a brief after-hours facility tour of Evergreen Care Center on a Sunday night. The administrator, thinking Marcus was a potential donor, agreed. The home was quiet, the halls dimly lit. As they walked the corridors, the administrator pointed out features. Marcus barely listened. He was watching the staff. Aides moved quietly in and out of rooms, checking on residents, and then he saw her. Amara was in a small lounge, not on a break. She was sitting with an elderly woman in a wheelchair, a woman who was staring vacantly at a silent television. Amara wasn't just sitting. She was holding the woman's hand and she was reading aloud from a textbook. And so the beta blockers reduce the heart's workload, she read in a calm, clear voice. The woman did not react, but her hand rested in Amara's. A fellow aide passed by and whispered to Marcus's guide, "She does that every shift, reads her homework to Mrs. Geller, says the voice calms her." This was not a job for Amara. This was a calling. Marcus ended the tour early. He had seen enough. In his car, the weight of what he was about to do fully settled on him. He was going to change the entire trajectory of this young woman's life. He believed it was right. But as he drove away, a chilling doubt whispered. He had engineered every step, from the anonymous repair to the debt forgiveness in progress. He had all the power, all the control. Was this truly a gift of solidarity, or was it the ultimate expression of the inequality he'd been testing? A billionaire playing God with a stranger's life, no matter how well-intentioned. The bridge was built. The machinery was in motion. There was no going back. And in 1 month, when the official letter arrived at apartment 3B, Amara Johnson's world would shatter, not from another crisis, but from a kindness so vast it would be indistinguishable from a seismic shock. The first sign that the plan was working too well came not from Amara, but from a loan servicer's automated email to Marcus's foundation, confirming the debt purchase. The second sign came from Amara's delivery app, which showed her activity had dropped to zero. For 4 days after the anonymous car repair, she didn't log on once. Marcus's team monitored the data feed, concerned. Had she gotten sick? Had the repair not worked? Then, on the fifth day, she accepted a single batch of deliveries in the evening. She completed 3, then went offline again. The rhythm was broken. The relentless machine had stuttered. The living expense grant, dispersed through a local community fund, arrived in her bank account as a direct deposit labeled City College Success Bursary. It was for $3,000. Marcus's financial advisor had calculated it would cover 3 months of her essential bills, freeing her from the delivery work grind. The notification of the deposit triggered an immediate, alarming reaction. Amara didn't celebrate. She called the community fund, then the college financial aid office, then the bursar. Her calls, which Marcus's team was discreetly tracking through the foundation's contacts, were all variations on the same theme. There must be a mistake. I didn't apply for this. I don't qualify for this. Who authorized it? The system was built for people to fight to get money in. It had no protocol for someone fighting to give money back. The officials, confused, told her the award was legitimate and non-refundable. She was advised to simply accept it. This only deepened her suspicion. Evelyn, the foundation head, updated Marcus. She's not experiencing relief, Marcus. She's experiencing anxiety. The narrative doesn't fit her reality. In her world, unexpected money comes with strings, or it's an error that will be clawed back with penalties. Marcus felt the first crack in his rational plan. He had solved a math problem, not a human one. Then, the main event. A formal, thick envelope from the U.S. Department of Education's designated loan servicer arrived at apartment 3B. Inside was a letter stating that her federal student loan portfolio, totaling $67,418.15, had been acquired and subsequently discharged in full by the Thorn Forward Foundation under its Healthcare Futures Debt Forgiveness Initiative. The balance was now zero. The letter included official tax forms for the upcoming year, noting the forgiven amount might be considered taxable income. It was clinical, bureaucratic, and utterly world-altering. Marcus, through his investigator, had a camera discreetly pointed at the apartment's mailboxes. He watched the video feed in his office as Amara collected the mail. He saw her stop in the dim hallway, her body going perfectly still as she read the first line. She leaned against the wall, her hand going to her mouth. She read it again, then a third time. She didn't scream or cry. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, the letter held loosely in her hands, staring at the opposite wall for a full 10 minutes. Then she began to shake. It was a deep, visceral tremor. She pulled her knees to her chest and buried her face, her shoulders heaving. It was the collapse of a dam holding back years of exhaustion and fear. Marcus had wanted to give her freedom. In that moment, it looked like he had broken her. He waited for the next phase, the call to a friend, the elated social media post, the celebration. It never came. She went back into her apartment. An hour later, she left for her CNA shift, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes were swollen. She didn't tell her roommate. She didn't tell anyone at work. She carried the secret like a live grenade, unsure if it was a gift or a trap. For 3 days, she moved through her life in a state of stunned, silent shock. She stopped delivery work entirely. She attended class but participated less. Her friends noticed she was distant. "You okay, Amara?" "Just tired," she'd say, the old, safe excuse. Marcus was bewildered. This was the dream, wasn't it? To have the weight lifted. Why wasn't she free? He requested another report. The investigator, interviewing acquaintances under a pretext, found the prevailing theory among her small circle was that Amara was burning out, maybe having a health crisis. No one knew about the debt clearance. She was hiding it. The investigator's summary was blunt. Subject appears to be experiencing profound psychological dislocation. The The sudden removal of a defining, lifelong burden has created an identity vacuum and triggered trust issues. She is waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe, in the form of a tax liability, was already in the air. While the American Rescue Plan Act had made student loan forgiveness tax-free at the federal level through 2025, her state still considered forgiven debt taxable income. A notice from the state revenue department arrived a week later, informing her of a tentative tax bill of approximately $3,800 on the forgiven amount. This was the confirmation her anxiety needed. The gift was a trick. It had created a new, immediate debt. She had no savings to pay it. The panic was now rational. Marcus's team had anticipated this. The plan was for the foundation to cover the tax bill as well. But before they could enact that step, Amara did something they did not predict. She went to a legal aid clinic at her college. She brought both letters, the forgiveness and the tax notice, and laid them on the table. She said, "I think I'm being scammed or stalked, or both. Can you help me figure out who did this and why and how to give it back?" The legal aid attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa, was intrigued. She started digging. The Thorn Forward Foundation was a real registered 501(c)(3. Its Healthcare Futures Initiative was not. It was a shell program created 2 months prior with no public footprint, no application process, and only one beneficiary, Amara Johnson. Lisa's next call was to the state's charity regulator. Then she filed public records requests. The foundation's move, meant to be clean and anonymous, now had a paper trail leading to a very curious lawyer. Marcus's lawyer, David, got a call from the regulator. "We have a complaint about a foundation potentially engaging in a private benefit scheme, disguising a personal gift as charitable activity. A Miss Amara Johnson is alleging she is the subject of an unknown benefactor's inappropriate attention." The walls were closing in. The ethical dilemma was now a legal and reputational one. Marcus had two choices: shut it all down, let the foundation retract the forgiveness, a near-impossible logistical and ethical nightmare, or step into the light. He chose the latter. He called Evelyn and David, set up a meeting with her and her lawyer. Full disclosure, I'll be there. The plan for a graceful future mentorship was dead. Now it was damage control and confrontation. The meeting was arranged at the foundation's offices, a neutral space. Amara arrived with Lisa, the legal aid attorney. She was dressed not in scrubs but in jeans and a sweater, her posture defensive. She was prepared for a fight or a confession from some creepy patron. She was not prepared for Marcus Thorn. He walked into the conference room and her face went blank with pure incomprehension. He was just a man, an older, well-dressed man. He didn't look like a monster or a fairy godmother. He looked familiar. And then it clicked. The delivery driver from the rainy night. The man she'd given $5 and a few kind words. Her brain short-circuited. The billionaire, the asterisk undercover billionaire. That was an internet meme, not a thing that happened in her life. Marcus spoke first. "Amara, my name is Marcus Thorn. You gave me a $5 tip on a rainy Friday night last month. You said, 'I know it's hard out there.'" He let that hang in the air. "I was conducting a personal experiment. I wanted to see if basic human kindness existed in the gig economy. You were the only person who showed me any, out of hundreds." He paused, seeing the storm of violation and anger building in her eyes. "I looked into your life to understand the context of that kindness. I saw the debt, the work, the dedication. My foundation, acted to eliminate that debt. It was poorly executed. I see that now. The tax bill will be taken care of. There are no strings. This is not a scam. It is a profoundly awkward, badly managed thank you." Amara found her voice thin with fury. "You investigated me. You bought my debt. You messed with my car. You put money in my account. You had no right to any of it. That tip wasn't an invitation into my life." Lisa put a hand on her arm, but Amara shook it off. "You were asterisk pretending to be poor, to be struggling, and I felt sorry for you. Do you have any idea how disgusting that is?" She stood up, her chair scraping loudly. "I don't want your money. I want my debt back. I want my life back. I knew how to fight that. I don't know how to fight this." She left the room, Lisa following after a sharp look at Marcus. The meeting had lasted 4 minutes. It had gone catastrophically worse than even his worst-case scenario. He had not given her a gift. He had taken her struggle, her identity as a fighter, and reframed it as a charity case. He had turned her genuine empathy into a data point in his existential experiment. The backlash wasn't just emotional, it was moral. And it was about to become public. Lisa, sensing a major story of power and ethics, didn't file a lawsuit. She called a journalist. 2 days later, an article appeared in the city's leading digital newspaper. The headline, "Billionaire Kindness Experiment Leaves Nursing Student Feeling Violated." It detailed the undercover week, the investigation, the debt payoff, and Amara's reaction. It quoted her extensively. "He turned the hardest thing in my life into a pet project. My debt wasn't a number to me. It was my story, and he erased it without my permission." The article went viral. The commentary split the internet. One side, "He's a hero, she should be grateful, she's crazy." The other, "This is the ultimate form of wealthy paternalism. He treated a human being like a sim in a video game." News outlets picked it up. Talk shows debated it. Marcus Thorne, the reclusive tech genius, was now the face of a national debate on charity, privacy, and power. Marcus retreated to his penthouse, besieged by calls. His board was concerned about the company's image. His foundation was fielding angry calls and supportive donations in equal measure. He had wanted to answer a question about human kindness. He had instead created a glaring case study on the unintended cruelty of good intentions. He was the villain in Amara's story, and in the eyes of millions. The loneliness he'd felt before was nothing compared to this isolation of universal condemnation. He had one path forward, and it was the hardest one. He had to listen, not as a researcher but as a person who had caused harm. He had to apologize, not with more money or solutions, but with the one thing he hadn't offered: genuine, powerless understanding. He asked Evelyn to reach out to Lisa one more time, not with an offer, with a request. He asked for a chance to apologize to Amara, with no agenda, no cameras, no lawyers, just him and her in a place of her choosing. He would accept any terms. After 2 days of silence, the answer came back. She agreed to meet, one time, at the Evergreen Care Center in the small courtyard garden, in public but private, on her turf. It was not forgiveness. It was an audition for his own humanity. And as he prepared to walk into that garden, Marcus Thorne knew that no amount of wealth could buy the outcome he desperately needed. He would have to earn it, word by painful word, for the first time in his adult life. The courtyard at Evergreen Care Center was a small square of patchy grass and weathered benches, a place for residents to get 10 minutes of sun. When Marcus Thorne arrived, Amara was already there, sitting with Mrs. Geller, the resident with advanced dementia. She was reading to her just as before. She didn't look up as he approached and stood at a respectful distance. He waited. After a few minutes, a fellow aide came and gently wheeled Mrs. Geller inside. Amara watched her go, then turned to face him. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was tired and deeply sad. "You said no agenda," she began. "So talk." Marcus didn't sit. He stood there, feeling the vast gulf between his world and this quiet courtyard. "Every word of your criticism was right," he said, his voice low. "I treated you like a puzzle to solve. I was arrogant. I confused resources with wisdom. I wanted to repay a kindness, but I didn't understand that the kindness was in seeing me as a person, and I immediately failed to see you as one. I reduced you to a set of problems my money could fix. I am sorry. Not for the outcome, which I still hope can help you, but for the violation, for the investigation, for making you feel like a project." Amara was silent for a long time, looking at her hands. "The debt was a monster," she said finally. "But it was my monster. I knew its size, its shape, its teeth. I had a plan to fight it. It was going to take decades and it was going to hurt, but it was my fight. When you took it away, you didn't just give me a gift. You took away my opponent. You left me in an empty ring with no idea who I was supposed to be anymore. And then I found out it was all part of some experiment that made me feel like a lab rat. The most dehumanizing thing wasn't the poverty. It was that." Marcus nodded. "I understand. Or I'm beginning to, I can't undo what I did. The debt is gone. The foundation will cover every tax bill no matter what you choose to do. But I can offer you the only thing I should have offered from the start, choice. If you want, I will have the foundation reissue the debt. We'll put it back in your name. You can tell us to walk away and never contact you again, and we will. Or you can keep the clean slate, or there might be a third option. But it's not my place to suggest it. It's yours to define if you want anything from me at all. He was giving back control. It was the only genuine currency he had left. Amara studied him, looking for the manipulation, the hidden angle. She saw only a weary, older man who seemed as lost as she felt. "What's the third option?" she asked, her guard still up. "You said my approach was wrong, that treating people as case studies is dehumanizing. You're right. So if you're willing, you could help me design a right way, not as a recipient but as a partner. Use your experience, your insight to shape how the foundation actually helps people, so the next person doesn't feel like a lab rat. They feel seen the way you saw me." He paused. "But that's a huge ask, and you owe me nothing." Amara looked out at the care center windows. She thought of her residents, of the healthcare system that relied on the exhaustion of people like her. She thought of the $67,000 ghost that was no longer chasing her. The anger was still there, but it was cooling into something else, a fierce, protective clarity. "I don't want the debt back," she said quietly. "That would be stupid, and I don't want to be your charity consultant." She turned back to him. "But there are 1,000 Amaras out there. Smarter, harder working, just as trapped. The system is designed to crush them. If you really want to help, don't help individuals as a secret billionaire. Change the system that creates the debt in the first place." That meeting didn't end with forgiveness or friendship. It ended with a tentative, brutally honest negotiation. Amara agreed to work with the Thorn Forward Foundation, but on her terms. She would chair a new student advisory board, comprised entirely of current healthcare students from diverse backgrounds. They would design programs, not receive them. Their first project, killing the third option Marcus had vaguely imagined and building something real. What emerged was the Bridge program. It didn't pay off debt for randomly selected individuals. It attacked the problem upstream. The program offered microloans to cover those sudden, crushing emergencies: the car repair, the broken laptop, the unexpected medical bill that forced students to drop out. Zero interest, flexible repayment based on future income. It funded paid, clinical research assistant positions within the hospital system, so students could gain vital experience without having to work unrelated night shifts. It negotiated with the college to cap and transparently justify program fees. And it created a robust mental health and peer mentorship network. Amara insisted the foundation also advocate politically for state-level change, supporting legislation to expand tuition coverage for in-demand healthcare roles. Marcus funded it without question, but he didn't design it, he listened. For the first time in his career, he was not the smartest person in the room, he was the student. Amara and her committee schooled him in the brutal arithmetic of survival. The program launched 9 months after the courtyard meeting. In its first year, it retained 94% of its students, compared to the national average of 80%. It was measurable, scalable, and it protected dignity. The public narrative slowly turned. A follow-up article, again driven by Amara's consent, told the story of the flawed experiment and its painful, productive aftermath. It highlighted the Bridge program. The headline, "From Violation to Validation: How a Billionaire's Mistake Fueled a Student's Mission." The comments were still divided, but the energy shifted from outrage to a more complex discussion about effective altruism and power sharing. Amara's life transformed, but not in the fairy tale way one might expect. The relief of the vanished debt didn't hit her as a single moment of joy. It seeped in slowly, over months, in quiet increments. She noticed it first when a classmate panicked about a $500 textbook charge, and Amara felt a pang of distant memory, not active fear. She noticed it when she could say no to a double shift at the care center because she needed to study, without calculating the catastrophic cost. She noticed it when she applied for a competitive summer internship at a top research hospital, an unpaid position she previously could never have considered, and got it. The debt had been a ceiling. Now it was gone, and she was still learning how high the sky was. She graduated with honors the following spring, not as a viral news story, but as the student speaker at her pinning ceremony. She didn't talk about Marcus Thorne. She talked about Mrs. Geller, about the quiet moments of care, about building systems that allow caregivers to survive. She accepted a job at that same research hospital in their geriatric neurology unit. Her starting salary was $78,000. For the first time in her adult life, her monthly income exceeded her monthly expenses. The feeling was one of profound, quiet stability. Marcus changed too. He stepped back from the operational side of his tech company, citing a desire to focus on philanthropic systems work. He became a frequent, quiet attendee at bridge program committee meetings, taking notes. He sold his penthouse and moved into a smaller, more connected downtown apartment. The loneliness didn't vanish, but it was now punctuated by genuine, demanding human connection. His friendship with Amara was exactly that, a friendship. It was not paternal. It was based on mutual respect, blunt honesty, and a shared project. They argued about strategy. She called him out when he relapsed into top-down thinking. He helped her navigate the boardroom politics she now faced. It was real. 2 years after the Rainey delivery, Marcus and Amara were having coffee in the Foundation's offices, reviewing the bridge program's expansion to 3 more states. As the meeting wrapped up, Amara said something offhand. "You know, I finally figured out what that $5 tip was really about." Marcus looked up. "What?" "It wasn't about you being a delivery driver," she said. "It was about me being a CNA. Every day I do invisible emotional labor that people take for granted. I see people at their most vulnerable. I knew that delivering food in the rain, getting ignored, treated like part of the app, that's a tiny slice of that invisibility. I tipped you because I saw your work as work, not as a service, but as labor. I was tipping the labor." She smiled a little wryly. "Turns out I was right. You were working, just on a very different project." Marcus laughed, a real, unguarded sound. It was the perfect, humbling closure to the entire bizarre saga. The kindness had been genuine, but its meaning was far deeper than he'd ever imagined. The final, surprising detail emerged from a routine audit of the Foundation's first-year results. The biggest cost saver, the item with the highest return on investment, wasn't the microloans or the stipends. It was the paid, clinical research positions. The hospital administrators reported that the students in these roles, because they were integrated into teams and not exhausted from outside jobs, were dramatically more engaged. They contributed to research, improved patient satisfaction scores, and several were hired as nurses directly upon graduation, reducing expensive recruitment costs. The program wasn't just charity. It was a smart, systemic investment that made the hospital itself function better. Kindness, it turned out, could be efficient. Dignity could be sustainable. Amara Johnson's story didn't end with a debt payoff. It began with one. The weight removed, she didn't float away. She planted her feet and started moving mountains for others with a clarity forged in the fire of her own struggle. And Marcus Thorne, the man who had everything, finally found something money couldn't buy, a purpose that mattered and a partnership that kept him honest. The undercover experiment was over. The real work had just begun. So what does this story of a billionaire, a $5 tip, and $67,000 in vanished debt actually tell us? It tells us that our most powerful instincts are often the simplest: to see someone and to be seen. Marcus Thorne went looking for a data point on human kindness and found a mirror instead, a reflection of his own isolation and the unintended cruelty of good intentions. Amara Johnson offered a moment of solidarity from within her own struggle, only to have her entire life appended by a thank you that felt like an invasion. Their journey wasn't from poverty to wealth. It was from isolation to partnership, from violation to respect. The real payoff wasn't the erased debt, as life-changing as that was. It was the painful, necessary lesson that crashed between them. That help without understanding is just another form of control. That dignity is not a perk of charity, but its fundamental prerequisite. The bridge program that grew from their conflict stands as proof that the most sustainable solutions are not handed down, but built together, with the people who know the problem from the inside. This story forces a difficult question. In a world of staggering inequality, where does real change begin? Does it begin with grand, sweeping gestures from the top? Or does it begin in the small, quiet moments of recognition between strangers? The answer, perhaps, is that it requires both, but only when the gesture is humbled by the insight of the struggle. Money can remove an obstacle, but only humanity can build a bridge. Amara's $5 tip was a tiny act of seeing. Marcus's billion-dollar response was a massive failure of vision. Their redemption was found in the middle ground, in the hard work of listening and rebuilding. It's a reminder that every system is just a collection of human choices, and those choices can be remade. We live in a time of delivery apps and digital distance, of curated lives and anonymous transactions. It is easier than ever to look past each other. But this story whispers that the opposite is also true. It has never been more important to look asterisk at asterisk each other, to acknowledge the labor, the struggle, the person behind the function. You never know what a moment of true seeing might set in motion. It might not pay off a debt, but it might pay forward something even more valuable, a sense of shared humanity. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the quiet power of recognition, then you're who we make these for. Subscribe to our channel for more documentaries that explore the profound collisions between human hearts and the systems we build. Hit the like button if you believe in stories that don't offer easy answers, but honest journeys. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that no act of kindness is ever too small to matter, and no amount of power can replace the wisdom of lived experience. Thank you for watching. Remember, the next time you have the chance to see someone, truly see them, you're not just being kind. You might be starting a story that changes everything.